Hi, my name is Franklin. Today, I'm presenting our paper, Non-Visual Cooking, exploring practices and challenges of meal preparation by people with visual impairments. Co-authors are Jamie, Peter, and Patrick. Prior research has shown that cooking-related tasks contain lots of visual information and cues, which can create barriers for people with visual impairments. Due to these barriers, many visually impaired people prefer eating out at restaurants, getting takeout, and preparing frozen food, which can be calorie-rich and more likely have poor nutritional value. On the other side, Christine Ha, the first blind contestant of MasterChef, won the third season of the show in 2012 and described the importance of cooking to people with visual impairments. There has also been training guidelines from blind communities and commercial cooking-related assistive technologies to assist visually impaired individuals to cook independently. However, little research has explored the practices of people with visual impairments in cooking and how they leverage different assistive devices for cooking. Furthermore, there has been little to guide HCI researchers on what stages or steps in the cooking process may benefit most from support via technology. Therefore, we were interested to explore what are current cooking approaches and techniques employed by people with visual impairments. What are the key challenges, concerns, and risks encountered while preparing meals? And what are potential opportunities for assistive technologies to support people's visual impairments to cook independently? To understand current cooking practices, we conducted a YouTube video analysis with 122 YouTube videos that depict and described cooking practices for people with visual impairments. We then conducted semi-structured interviews with 12 visually impaired people who have experienced cooking to understand existing challenges and potential opportunities. From the YouTube video analysis, we summarized 12 different activities under 3 categories of preparation, cooking, and tools, environment, and recognition. For example, how do people with visual impairments test food for dryness, measure liquids, and use existing appliances? In our interviews, we then uncovered 8 main themes of challenges and opportunities in cooking. Utilizing tools is the first challenge that our interviewees mentioned the concerns of messing up tools with dirty hands and food during cooking, which might mess up the grill tactile markers. They also mentioned that they sometimes struggled with having too many tools for different purposes and existing tools lack confirmation and feedback. We also found that existing guide menus and instructions of kitchen appliances lack sufficient details, and recipe content does not correspond to how people with visual impairment cook, such as using too many images. And existing recipe structures are not standard and friendly to people with visual impairments due to the different order of nutrition facts, ingredients, cook's notes, and cooking steps. Finally, we found people with visual impairments sometimes have a difficult time interacting with recipe while cooking. For touching and feeling, we found that hand feeling is not sufficient to tell all the information about certain cooking procedures, such as it can be difficult to feel the liquid level if the liquid is in room temperature. And using hands to feel objects might not be appropriate, safe, and efficient. To maintain safety, our interviewees mentioned the concerns of getting burned during different cooking procedures. Difficulty of handling accidents while cooking and other people walking by could potentially cause safety concerns. To precisely measure food and follow cooking steps, we found that making precise steps while cooking can be a huge barrier for people with visual impairments, such as getting the right amount of baking soda while baking, because using a hand to feel the level in a measuring cup of powder is challenging. We learned that the long learning curve of new methods, which force people stick with their familiar ways of cooking. We also found that following cooking steps or procedures precisely according to a recipe or instructions remain challenging for visually impaired cooks. To organize the kitchen space, our participants complained about the challenges of finding previously used objects or cookware due to the mental load during cooking. We also found that our participants have a hard time tracking the status of tasks in progress and parts of the food, such as knowing which part of the food on the pan need to be flipped. After cooking, we found visually impaired individuals sometimes have a hard time knowing and remembering where to clean. While inspecting an item or food, we found that our participants have a hard time checking food quality, telling whether things got peeled or cleaned thoroughly, and inspecting an accidental mix of unwanted things, such as having eggshells in scrambled eggs, or feeling the whole pineapple will make the hands very sticky. Finally, we found that 10 out of 12 participants mentioned that they do not like cooking with another person because they need to continuously communicate with each other, and this may distract people from focusing on specific tasks. They also mentioned the challenges of making sure the food item is in the camera's field of view while using Be My Eyes or Aira for assistance and potential appliance modification barriers in a communal space. From our paper, we uncovered new opportunities for HCI and SS researchers in blind cooking. We first found that people with visual impairments rely on touching and feeling when cooking, such as measuring and checking for food doneness. Therefore, interacting with touch-based electronic devices might be inconvenient because their hands are often dirty. This brings new opportunities for HCI researchers to explore speech interaction tools and mid-air hand gestures to control appliances. From the interview, our participants mentioned the difficulties in tracking the status of tasks in progress and protecting themselves from getting burned during cooking. Future researchers could potentially leverage computer vision approaches, such as using thermography approaches for heat detections and use object recognition for proactive activity reminders. Although we mentioned people with visual impairments do not like cooking with others due to safety concerns, few of them also mentioned that it is time-saving sometimes for other people to accomplish tasks that rely on vision, such as checking expiration dates and food doneness. Also, cooking is a social behavior sometimes. This brings opportunities for technology to explore collaborative cooking behaviors for people with visual impairments and further create guidelines and training methods to reduce safety concerns. Finally, future researchers could further explore cooking behaviors in depth through contextual inquiries and conducting studies with teachers and trainers who teach people with visual impairments in cooking. Thanks for listening. For more details and information, please read our paper.